Hello and welcome. I am Vivienne King. I'm a board member of Revo, and I would like to welcome you all to the first in a series of articles we're running on the reopening in the UK following our lockdowns, looking at what we've learned from last year and what's going to be different this year. I'm joined today by Carl Foreman. Carl, welcome. Carl is Managing Director of PM+U, a proactive property management company covering all asset classes in the UK. Carl has over 20 years experience in the retail and property management industries and has worked for some of the biggest global real estate firms in a number of different capacities. Carl was also instrumental in the publication of a reopening guide that Revo produced last year. And he also took part in 2 webinars that we ran on reopening last year, along with other Revo members, Alison Hodkinson, Graham Williams, Ray Holdstock, Tim Rylance, Melanie Palmer and Phil Grew. Carl, I'm very glad to welcome you back to this conversation.
Thanks. Thank you, Vivienne.
So reflecting on 2020, what have we learned from that experience about reopening, Carl?
Well, I think it's been a once-in-a-lifetime experience, or what we thought was going to be a once-in-a-lifetime experience of closing shopping centres and retail parks. It's actually happened 3 or 4 times in the last 12 months. So actually, I think we've become quite adept at closing down our schemes and reopening them, and also keeping them open for non-essential retailers.
That's good to hear. So when we were preparing the report last year and when we were running our webinars, there was a strong focus on practical things, hygiene of course, but also communication was paramount. So tell me, what worked well from what we were preparing and what didn't work so well?
With the reopening of lockdown 1, no one really knew what to expect. The retailers, the government, nor the owners of the schemes. And as such, it was definitely a belt and braces approach, which whilst correct, in hindsight probably cost a lot of businesses a lot of money that didn't necessarily need to be spent. Overall though, I think the industry as a whole has coped remarkably well under the circumstances, or adapted as quickly as it has actually been able to.
The following article after this one will involve CACI presenting on a report that they've recently published, preparing for the new consumer reality. It's based on a survey that they carried out. Without wishing to do a spoiler on what it says, what do you draw from the findings? Because I know that you've read it.
Without obviously giving away too much, there's a definite desire for people to get out and spend money, but they will only do so if they feel safe. The way that people work, play, shop, and for that matter of fact, work has changed. And there's been a huge increase in people's awareness of social good causes. So all of these factors are really going to influence where a customer chooses to shop, how they choose to shop, and more importantly, what they actually choose to spend their money on. So hopefully that hasn't given away too much.
I hope not. I don't think so. I don't think so. There's plenty more in there, which is fascinating. So lockdown is drawing to a close. Across the UK over the coming weeks. What's different, do you think, about this reopening compared to the previous 2?
I think that we've done it before and we know what to expect. I think that a lot has been learned from the previous 2, in some places even 3 lockdowns. And actually, a lot of it's become the norm when it comes to reopenings.
So what would your approach be now to reopening, and perhaps what would you advise others to do and not to do?
I think the most important part, Vivienne, is we've got to trust our site teams, we've got to trust the public, we've got to trust our retailers to be able to make the best decisions. I honestly don't believe that we need to go overboard in preparations, but we do need to make sure that people feel welcome and safe and want to come back and shop.
So Carl, what's your approach to managing reopening and what would you advise others to do and not to do?
Well, I think, Vivienne, that the most important part is that we need to trust our site teams, we need to trust the public, and we need to more importantly trust the retailers as well to make the best decisions. I honestly don't think that we have to go overboard in our preparations. As I said, we've been there before, but the most important part is to make sure that people feel welcome, safe, and that they want to come back and actually spend their money and shop.
Okay, so we've all got used to working online and working remotely and communicating in the way we're communicating now. What role does digital have to play in the communication that we want to employ for reopening and building confidence?
Digital's probably become the most important bit of communication in the last year. People who have never been online for web calls and things are suddenly all experts at how to do it. But digital communication is probably one of the most effective ways that you can talk to your retailers and customers in a quick and friendly manner, whether it's through communicating on WhatsApp groups, various mail communication software, or even via the websites. Every little counts to making the visit to the retail venue easier and more comfortable.
Last year, we were prompted to publish the guidance because I think it's fair to say there were a few gaps in government guidance and regulations, and we weren't quite sure what we should be doing. Do you feel more confident this time about what the rules are?
I don't think that you can really account for every situation with a set of rules and regulations. I just think it's impossible to do so. So for me, the best we can do is really rely on informed decisions that ensure any environment is safe and secure. I mean, the government regulations, for example, at the moment don't state anything around track and trace, nor, for example, how do you deal with takeaways inside a shopping centre once they've been bought. So for me, I would just make sure that until the 17th of May, when the government reviews its position on social distancing, etc., we should probably continue to use track and trace if we offer any form of common area seating, and this would include your food courts or food halls, for example, where people may sit after having bought a takeaway. Alternatively, the rules that are going to be in place now say that if you are going to sit down for an indoor meal, it has to be table service, and that's what centres are going to have to do otherwise, which I'm not quite sure we've necessarily got the staff to be able to do it. But again, as I said, you've got to make the most informed decisions that you can make under the circumstances.
Last year, we know how important it was for centre owners to be working with occupiers. How's that going to work this time, given that different occupiers are on different timetables for reopening?
Look, you're a partnership. There's no question about it. You can't work independently. It's all about collaborative working, and we have to work hand in glove with our tenants. A lot of them are going to need our guidance because they are independents and may not necessarily know all the rules and regulations. So communication is just going to be the most paramount thing that you can do, especially around things like trading hours, when the car parks will be open, when they're going to close, etc. Because different parts of the economy, as you quite rightly say, are going to be opening at different times, and the centres will have to adapt as we go with those, with those dates.
Thinking about service charges for a moment, service charges had their problems in 2020. In fact, Revo has a webinar upcoming on the very topic. Tell me, how have you been managing service charges over this period?
I think on the whole, property management teams have actually been superb in managing their costs through COVID in 2020 and again into 2021. I think on average, there have probably been some fairly substantial savings that have been achieved through last year. And this year's budgets, from what I understand from speaking to colleagues, they are less than last year's non-COVID budgets, probably by between 5 and 10%. So overall, I think that the property management industry has really done a great job on it. There's no question there are problems that are still out there, and there will be some severe pressure going forward, because even though we've made these substantial savings of, say, 20-25% through the COVID year, our collection stats aren't reflecting on that. So we've still got a gap between what has actually been collected and what has been managed to save. So I think we're in for a difficult year, but bottom line is I think that everybody has certainly played their part, whether it is the management teams or the soft services teams. I really do think they've played their part very well during the year.
That's really good to hear. So we wrote Getting Ahead without any of the experience that we've had since. We wrote about reopening and what it should involve based on the knowledge we had back in the spring last year. If we were writing it again now, Carl, what would be different?
wouldn't do very much that is different. If you read through the guide, it is a fairly standard guide. It can be used at any time. I think the one thing that I would change would be certainly to suggest that people take just a little bit more time to decide how important an issue is and how long it may last for. The 2-meter rule is a classic example of that, or the stickers that everybody had on the floor. And therefore, before committing large amounts of money to implement those changes, they actually decide whether they are really, really going to be needed and how long they're going to be there for.
Good advice, Carl, thank you. And that brings us to a close. So thank you, Carl, very much indeed for those sage words and great advice. And thank you, everybody, for listening.
Thank you.